All right, so it finally happened. Bit of a hit to my ego, to my pride, especially as someone who coaches type 1 diabetics. But the time has come, and I finally hired a coach. I practice what I preach. I always tell you guys, coach is the answer, right? And I'm like, you know what? And this is especially hard because this is on a topic that I am seemingly already an expert on, but admittedly was not, and have learned in the last week that there were some major pitfalls that I narrowly avoided. We call it the ignorance task. I was completely ignorant and was about to pay that tax pretty hard. So in today's episode, I'm going to share with you what I learned from my coach and some things that I've noticed direct parallels with type 1 diabetes, including some things that you might be missing in your own diabetes management that if you're anything like me, you probably want to know about so you can avoid those pitfalls and learn from the mistakes of others. That's the key behind coaching, at least. Now, in today's lesson, where I share about my own pitfalls and a few of the lessons that I've learned, I hope this is helpful for you because as a type 1 diabetic coach, I hired a coach. It's a bit of an ego hit, like I mentioned, a coach coaching a coach. But I want to share this with you and be a bit transparent behind the lessons that I've learned in hopes that it helps you to make leaps and bounds of progress in your own life. If you don't know who I am, my name is Matt Vandevecht. Like I said, I'm a coach. I live with type 1 diabetes. I'm also a certified master fitness trainer and nutritionist. And in today's lesson, I break down what I've learned from someone else who's further in life than I am. So we'll get into our theme song, then hop into today's lesson.
I've spent the last 10 years pushing the limits while identifying trends and patterns in my type 1 diabetes management. Follow along as I learn, apply, and share the fitness, nutrition, and lifestyle strategies that I've learned from diabetes experts around the world. The real question is, how can we live fearlessly with diabetes while maintaining stable blood sugars? This podcast is here to give you the answer. My name is Matt Vandevecht, head coach and co-founder of FTF Warrior, and welcome to Pardon My Pancreas.
So as I mentioned, a bit of a hit to my ego this one was, where, to acknowledge that I needed help with something that I have been helping others with already in a professional sense was difficult to do. But my wife actually was the supporting catalyst that kindly forced me to make this shift. And the shift is that I am currently training for a full distance Ironman. If you don't know what that is, because admittedly I didn't really, even a year ago, it's a race that is 140.6 miles. It's a swim, then it's a bike, then it's a run. It's all of those things, and it's a really long race. And I told her, I'm going to do it. It's officially on the bucket list. It's something hard that I want to prove to myself and to others that I can do with type 1 diabetes. And she said, okay, under two conditions. Number one, this is your last race. Because I've said that this is my last race 3 times now. I started with sprint distance triathlons, then I did Olympic distance triathlons, then I did a half Ironman, and so that was the last one. And I told her I would never do a full distance Ironman unless by some miracle I get cured of type 1 diabetes, because then it wouldn't be dangerous, right? It would just be hard. And then after my half Ironman, I said, you know what? No, you're going to do it, aren't you? I have to. I get it, but 2 conditions, right? So first condition was this is the last race. And we joke about that because now I'm like eyeing ultra marathons. I'm like, maybe stop it. But number 2, after it being my last race, is that this race needs to count. And so I will be hiring a coach. And I was like, ooh, that kind of hurts, And she's like, why? And I'm like, because I'm a certified master fitness trainer and nutritionist, and I coach other people on this stuff. And she's like, you're not an Ironman yet, though. And that's a very different skill set. And I was like, okay, that's fair. Very specialized, nuanced topic of endurance athletics, right? I don't know what it takes. So I did some research and called up a few people, made some appointments for consultations, which is the exact same thing that we offer, where it's like, hey, you can talk to us to see if our programs, if our coaching is even helpful for you before you sign up. That's kind of the point, right? It'd be ridiculous for you to have to sign up and then find out if we can help you or not. So in the same sense, they offer these free consultations where you call up and you're like, hey, I want to learn about you. You want to learn about me and my goals. We're going to see if it's a good fit. Found this guy, and perfect fit. This guy's amazing. He knows his stuff. Wasn't necessarily the most popular choice, and he's not like got all the medals from winning the Olympics and all this crazy stuff like some of the other coaches had, but he knew his stuff. He was an expert, and I could see that. I said, you know what, this is exactly what I need. And his approach was unique as well, in that it was more realistic. It was more set up for quality of life while training for an Ironman, whereas other people are meant to train professional athletes. And I was like, I'm just here to finish. I'm not trying to win the whole thing, you know? So we aligned in our goals, which was a really important step for us. But the reason behind hiring a coach, in addition to my wife telling me very kindly that that was the path I would be taking, is that I found that having a coach gave me two important things. Well, three technically. One is certainty. Certainty in the results, right? Where I know he has a plan, and it is the blueprint for my success because he's done it with a ton of other people. And in our discussion, we also found out, because I was like, hey, I'm type 1 diabetic, by the way. Is that going to be an issue? And he was like, no, I actually have another type 1 client in your city. I'll link you guys up. And I ended up meeting with this guy, this other type 1 who has been doing Ironmans for years successfully. I was like, this is amazing, right? So yeah, that's kind of a side benefit of signing up with a coach, is you also gain access to their community, their connections, right? So I linked up with him. I talked to some other of his clients after joining, of course, and it's because before you join, there's client confidentiality. It wouldn't make sense to give out the names of your clients, right? So after I joined with this coach, he was like, by the way, you got to talk to these people. They're going to help you out. But the certainty behind the results, that's what I was after, where I could follow his plan knowing it was the right step. And number two is to avoid the pitfalls that I was unknowingly headed towards, right? So like, let's say that I were blindfolded. Let's use you. You're the example. Let's say you were blindfolded and you were driving a car. Not a good combo, right? If the road is straight and you're pretty good at holding the steering wheel, you should be okay for at least a while, right? But if there's a turn in the road and a cliff on the other side of that turn, you wouldn't know when to turn or if to turn. You might drive straight off the cliff and not know it until you crashed. And in many senses of the example, that is exactly what I was doing. And so I told my coach, I said, hey, the plan ultimately was just to keep doing more, harder things every single week, push myself faster, longer distances. And he was like, how's that been going for you? And I was like, good. I mean, I got injured like 6 times. And he's like, yeah, that's one of the things that's going to happen. And I was like, what do you mean one of the things? And he's like, that only works to a certain extent. You can only try harder to a certain extent. That's not going to work for a full distance Ironman. Are you nuts? And I was like, whoa, what are you talking about? I can't just do harder things and get used to it and continue doing harder things. He's like, no, effort alone will only get you so far, right? And I see this with my clients. I know those free consultations we do often where I'm like, okay, you got to 60%, 70%, sometimes 80 or 90% time in range. What's the strategy been? And oftentimes they're like, I just try really hard. I always watch my blood sugars, and I'm a bit restricted in my food choices, activity choices, but it works, right? And that's essentially the same thing I was doing with my Ironman training. I was like, I'm just going to try harder and train more, have less fun. And my coach was like, no, that's not going to work. First of all, we need to make sure you actually enjoy the sport again. So tomorrow's workout, and I was like, whoa, tomorrow? He was like, we're jumping right in. Of course, tomorrow, right? And that was number 3 for me, was accountability, where I was like, oh, we're jumping straight in, and he's watching my progress, right? And in fact, he told me, get this fancy watch, which was very expensive, to link up all of my vitals, my workout progress, my recovery rates. Everything goes to his computer now, automatically uploads everything. So to have somebody watching you to that degree has certainly made me a bit more intentional with my workouts. It keeps me accountable to where I'm consistently giving my best where it needs to be. But he ended up saying, for your workout tomorrow, I want you to go have fun. I said, what? He's like, go for a fun bike ride. No distances, just, an hour and a half, go have fun. I was like, seriously? Like, part of me doubted the plan for a second, and I was like, have fun? What do you mean? I have to work hard. This is a very difficult race to do. In fact, the Ironman, and he knows this too, but I was like, the Ironman is known as the world's most difficult single day endurance race to humans, like across the map. It's the hardest one. And he wants me to go have fun. I'm like, whatever, I'll do it. And within a few days, I was eager to go work out again. I was like, okay, I've had my fun. I am just itching to go work my butt off and sweat and do something hard. And he somehow reinvigorated me. He lit the spark inside where I was like, I want to push, right? And I was kind of on the edge of burnout. So that's a beautiful thing that coaches have, is they can kind of see everything top down, see the whole playing field. I think he could kind of tell that I was just like, I'm just here to get to the end result, right? He's like, no, you have to enjoy the process. Otherwise, this whole thing is silly. Why are we doing this? So as a coach, in his wisdom, he's like, no, pull back, go have some fun. So I towed my daughter, and I'll put a picture up on screen if you're on YouTube with me. I pulled my daughter in a little bike carrier thing, bike carriage. I don't know what you want to call it, but she's behind me on my road bike, and we had a blast. We ended up riding, I think, for 2 hours. And she actually really enjoyed the whole thing. It was a beautiful day. It was tons of fun. Lisa came out with us, my wife as well, on her own bike. And we got to enjoy biking around San Diego Bay. It was beautiful. So it's really interesting seeing the perspective shifts, the strategy shifts, the pitfalls that I've been able to avoid, especially the overtraining one, because I have been injured about 5 or 6 times in my process of trying to go harder and harder and harder every single week. And now he's introducing me to this new method that's not new. I knew about it, called periodization. It's something we're all familiar with in the training world, but I hadn't been implementing. And this is something that I see with diabetics as well, is you might even know what to do, but you're just not doing it, right? For whatever reason, stubbornness, you don't believe it's going to work. Maybe you don't think that it's the right time for it. But I want to go back as well to the pride issue that I had, where I've been a trainer, and more recently a master fitness trainer, for almost a decade, right? Taking on clients, helping people, and then it led into now I only work with type 1 diabetics, more specifically on blood sugars and blood sugar formulas, right? Because blood sugars have to come first before you even consider tackling any fitness or weight loss goals. But I've been working on that and on myself for almost a decade. And I was like, man, I got a decade of knowledge, right? And he's like, first of all, is it specialized in Ironman? And I was like, no. But second, with diabetics, I see this where they'll, I've had diabetes for 50 years. Like, what else could I learn? What else is new? And I'm like, all right, back up for a second. Have you been constantly researching and innovating over the last 50 years? Every single year, new strategy, new experiment, new attempt at mastering your blood sugars. Or did you learn just enough to survive that first year, gain all the info so that you could get by at good enough type of a level, and then repeat the same year 50 times, right? Very different scenarios. And for him, to his credit, the first year of my studies, very intense. I learned everything that I could. About 5 years in, I got reinvigorated. I was like, I got to learn how to be a master fitness trainer. I want to master the art. But since then, my attention has gone solely to blood sugar formulas, diabetes math, right? And so we get this recycle, this rinse and repeat, kind of a shift in our life once we feel like we've gotten to a level of good enough. And with diabetes, that's detrimental to our success, because every year there are new technology pieces, new strategies, new medications. And on top of that, the research that myself and my team does, we find new blood sugar variables, new variations of blood sugar formulas. In fact, just 2 months ago, we made an adaptation inside of our program for a new piece of a blood sugar formula that allows for more precise control for endurance training, because now I'm training for endurance athletic events. So if you stop learning, you've now completely lost your momentum. So people who say, oh, I've had 50 years of diabetes, come on, I know everything there is to know. I'm like, I highly doubt that. Because nobody knows everything there is to know. And that's the beautiful part of life, is that we're always learning, constantly adapting, constantly innovating to what is new. Now, with this coaching experience, he's opening my eyes to a lot of things that I falsely believed were true. One of the things was, if I try harder, I will achieve more. He said yes to a certain extent, right? I see all the time with people I talk to, I just try harder, right? I'll count my carbs better. I'm going to document my blood sugars more. I'm like, it's not about documenting your blood sugars more. There's only so much you can write down. It's about the interpretation of the data. It's about how you analyze it, how you adapt, what do you change, right? It's the context behind the data that you have to understand if you expect to try something new. And that's the key, is trying something new, right? If you're not making the progress that you expect, if you're not achieving the things you set out to achieve, then something needs to change within your strategy. Because if you continue trying the same things, expecting different results, that is the definition of what? Insanity. It's the definition of insanity, is doing the same thing, expecting different results. So if we continue to do the same things, we must admit the hard truth that we're being a little bit crazy, right? When the reality is that we likely just need to pivot, an adaptation to our strategies. And in many cases, not all, admittedly, not all, but in many cases, that adaptation is a blood sugar formula. And that's what those consultation calls are for, by the way, is for me to help decide if formulas are the right step for you or not, which is why we talk to people about this. By the way, if you have not yet either entered into our ecosystem and seen our trainings, or if you've never talked to me or the team, that's going to be your next step right now as somebody living with type 1 diabetes. Just like my coach has me and everybody else do in the beginning, I had to go do my research on him, make sure that his methods were something that I thought could help me, right? So I went to his page, I went to his bio, I went to his certifications, I went to his methodologies, and then I set up a call. So the same, in a very similar path, what we do is we have a free training where you can go watch and see what the heck blood sugar formulas are all about, because you've likely never heard that term before, and the reason is that I created them. Blood sugar formulas are my baby. Well, I have an actual baby now. Her name's Brooklyn, and she's beautiful. She's a toddler, but it doesn't matter. The blood sugar formulas are the key to finding flexibility with quality of life and healthy blood sugars, right? It's that bridge, it's the crossover there. So if you have not yet seen that training, it's completely free, because we want you to be able to check us out and see if it's something that might benefit you before you make any commitments whatsoever. You can go find that training right now at diabetesinaction.com. Reason it's called that is because we expect to live our lives with diabetes in action, not to be held back by diabetes, not to put ourselves in this little diabetes prison where we have to eat low carb or keto or vegan or any of this silliness. You can eat that if you want, but it should be what you want. And how you accomplish that is through formulas, where you're able to say, I want to have a pizza tonight, and I also want to stay 100% in range. Cool. Blood sugar formula, right? Or like me, I want to go train for an Ironman. That's insane, right? But as a type 1 diabetic, all I have to do is get my formulas dialed in, and I know exactly how many carbs to eat, how to adjust my insulin, what other types of considerations might help me to avoid landing in the hospital, right? That's where you're going to find your answers. So if you haven't yet, or even if you have and you just forgot what it's been like, go to diabetesinaction.com. Watch the free training at the end of it. If you like what you see, it sounds like something that might help, there's an option to book a call with my team. We chat for 15 minutes, can point you in the right direction. Okay, so definitely recommend that first. And actually, speaking of that program, it's funny because my clients and I were talking on a recent coaching call, and we were kind of joking, but also like just self-analyzing. We're like, I have this habit to default to whatever the most expensive option is because I feel like it's the best quality thing that I'm going to get. And while that might not always be true, what is often true is that the cheaper things are, there's corners that get cut. So anytime I see something that's like on super sale or just is cheap, I'm like, how much is saving money going to cost me? Right? In a very different sense of the word, but like, how much is saving XYZ dollars going to cost me, whether it's time or like I have to buy a new thing later because it broke, right? Or frustration or peace of mind it's going to cost me. So we were just joking around about like, I just look for the most expensive thing and I'm like, all right, I got to figure out how I can afford that because that's probably the best solution. And that's what it was with the coach that I hired as well. I saw his website and I was like, that's pricey. But you know what? That's a good sign because if he was charging that and wasn't getting people results, he probably would be out of business, right? Because then nobody would pay him. But also that he has the certainty behind his results. He's seen probably hundreds of athletes through his programs, and that's what I look for as well, is that certainty behind it. Like I mentioned in the beginning, I love certainty. That's actually where blood sugar formulas came from. Now that I think about it, I was after certainty with my blood sugars. I hated the idea of not knowing if they were going to go up or go down, or if I was going to go low, how low was I going to go? Is this meal going to spike me? I don't know. Hated that. So for me, like the whole discovery process of research and documentation and experimentation to understand blood sugar formulas better, and what we created is now called the 80-20 blood sugar formula, it's because I was desperate for certainty. That's what I wanted with my type 1 diabetes. And it turns out I still like it. And that's what I was looking for with my coach, is certainty behind the results, so that I know, hey, if I pay you money and I put the time and effort in that's required based on the workouts and the things you tell me to do, I know I'm going to get my result, right? And that, while it's not guaranteed, obviously, because he can't guarantee that I put the work in, so there's obviously that, but knowing that if I do what I'm told, I'm going to be headed in the right direction. It's a big deal. But one other thing that comes to mind with this whole discussion of coaching, right, and going above and beyond. Like, there's other athletes who've done the whole thing and never hired a coach. It's possible, right? And I told my wife, I was like, if I didn't hire a coach, I would still cross that finish line. You know that, right? And she was like, I know, but it wouldn't look pretty. And I was like, it would not look pretty. I would be crawling across the finish line, broken and bloodied, and probably like severe hypoglycemia throughout the race. I would have had issues, but I would have crossed that finish line. I need you to know that. She was like, I know you. I know you're determined, you're committed, you would have finished that race. You would be an Ironman by yourself. But she's speaking from experience. She's like, I prefer knowing that you'll be safe. I prefer knowing that it won't be survival during the race. It will be you thriving. And I was like, yeah, I agree. I don't want to have to be worried about a hospital trip while I'm in the race. I want to thrive as I race. I want to be able to enjoy that process, right? And with diabetes, same thing. Like, you could probably, quote unquote, figure out your blood sugars, right? Through restriction, through consistency, through, honestly, starvation. If you just didn't eat for a day, you'd probably be pretty stable, maybe even in range the whole time. But that's just surviving, right? For people who hold themselves to a higher standard, like all my clients do, thriving is an option. And I don't know if enough people know that, but you can actually thrive with type 1 diabetes. And that's one of the missions that I set out to show with these ridiculous races that I'm doing. An Ironman. I'm still in a little bit of disbelief about this whole thing. Like, I don't know, it's kind of impulsive, but that's what I set out to show, is that you can live your best life with type 1 diabetes. You can thrive while training for ridiculous races, raising a family, eating fun foods while traveling through Europe, right? You can do these things and still be healthy with your blood sugars. You just need to set up your blood sugar formulas to get there. That's it, right? So, you get to decide ultimately what you are after. And that's the beauty behind it. I've made the decision that I will not settle for less. I'm not going to settle for just surviving, just getting by in anything in life. That's not the kind of person that I am. I am looking for an opportunity to thrive in every capacity, in my family life, in my business life, in my diabetes life, in my athletic career that I'm now just picking up. I want to surpass expectations and thrive in every capacity that I can. So, if that's someone, or if you are someone that would find comfort in more certainty behind your blood sugar numbers, certainty is only achievable through either restriction, which affects your quality of life, or blood sugar formulas, which gives you quality of life. You can go check out that training. Like I said, it's completely free to see if it's even something you think will be helpful for you. But you got to go check it out now at diabetesinaction.com, because people who take action see results. That's the kind of person that you are. So that's my lesson. I think that's everything I've got today. Took a bit of a hit to my ego, which you might have to as well. You might think, oh, I know enough about diabetes. I've had this for X, Y, Z years. Yeah, but you probably don't have the specialized knowledge that you're missing. You don't have the overview perspective to see where the gaps are, or what cliffs are coming up, which pitfalls you're about to drive off of because you're blindfolded. You're ignorant to the things that you are unaware of. And that's where we come in. That's where we can help to pinpoint which things in your diabetes management might need a subtle shift that might fix enormous amounts of things and give you some peace of mind back. So go check it out, diabetesinaction.com. I hope you enjoyed this one. If you haven't yet, hit the subscribe button. You guys get notified. I put these out at least once a week, and I hope to see you in the next one. Have a fantastic rest of your day. It's not about survival. It's about thriving. I wish you the best. Keep up the fight.